Mr. Jawanja Kunjufu understands that the positive self image in discipline is non existent or barely present in the lives of Black children. And he believes the first step to solving this issue is by acknowledging it and determining its perpetrators and motives. This chapter focuses on the interpersonal relationships in educating Black children. He provided a brief overview of the political landscape affecting Black American children, including a multitude of information such as the purpose of education, changing patterns in childhood, the relationship between the economy and schools, statistical analysts, and more, on which I'd like to offer my thoughts and opinions. So, the purpose of education. The purpose of education is to transmit accumulative wisdom and knowledge of the society from one generation to the next and prepare children for their future participation in the maintenance and development of the society. However, what many fail to realize or ignore is that this has changed when colonial rule entered. When controlling another people for one's group gain became a thing, a formal system of education was introduced. It was not to prepare children for service into the community in which they lived, but rather to produce servants in the colonial administration. And contemporary Black Americans are living proof of this, as majority of the businesses in the inner city are not owned and operated by the vast majority of its residents, which are Black Americans. See, the word education did not assume that critical knowledge had to be imposed from without, but as the word itself implies, it was to educe within. When Black excellence was at its highest, I like to bring up ancient Kemet, which is something I could only dream of in this current day. We understood that the method of educing knowledge was done through the cultivation of an interdiscipline which brought these resources to the fore. See, let's look at the etymology of the word education. The base word is actually educe, Educe, which means to bring out or develop. And then obviously the ation, which is a suffix, is to change a verb into a noun. Carter G. Woodson was one of the greatest scholars. He knew that Black American youth were not only being miseducated, but de educated, as the Black youth was not only being excluded from the educational system, but when included, they were being systematically destroyed within that system. This issue is of great complexity, nuance, and magnitude that takes a critical thinker with talent to tackle the numerous dimensions of this problem. Somebody like Jawanza Kunjufu. The relationship between the economy and schools and the interconnectedness of childhood. This leads me to my second point of this chapter, changing patterns of childhood and how the relationship between the economy and schools interconnect. So, the invention of childhood as a separate state corresponds with the society economic structure. But the childhood state actually changed throughout Western history. See, prior to the Industrial Revolution, which took place in Europe, childhood as a distinct developmental stage was virtually non existent, as children participated directly in the family's economic activities. Work was predominantly home based, making the household a self sufficient economic unit. Subsequently, daughters learned their mother's trades and sons followed in their father's footsteps. What the Industrial Revolution did was eliminate many of the production functions of the family as work had become split from the family life, threatening this disruption. Children are playing while adults are working away from home. In other areas of Western culture, childhood to adulthood was defined by people's reading competency. Now that I touched on the stages of childhood in the Western culture past, you may be wondering, what does childhood have to do with the economy in schools? We know that schools are designed to produce labor power according to the demands of capital by making differentiatory school knowledge available to advantaged and disadvantaged groups. I mean, think about it. Private schools often offer advantages over public schools, including smaller class sizes, more individualized attention, and generally higher academic standards. Furthermore, schools with a predominantly white student body may also provide a superior educational experience compared to schools with majority ethnic student bodies. These factors can contribute to a higher probability of these students' success within the Western system and providing for oneself/family. The different qualities in schools pertaining to its resources, environment, parent, teacher, mindset, and equipment naturally produces hierarchy, exclusion, and inequality between social and ethnic groups. Here's an example for you. Historically, Mississippi economy was heavily reliant on cotton production, necessitating a subsequential workforce. While other states had compensatory education laws, Mississippi still did not. This effectively weaponized the education system, producing a workforce suitable for cotton production and ensuring their compensation aligned with their limited educational attainment. This was outright exploitation by purposely providing limited education so residents were paid less. I mean, the main objective for Mississippi was high profits from their cotton industry at the expense of their residents' livelihoods. I mean, as a Black American, it should make you think twice about the type of environment that is created for us and what role in society our perpetrators want us to play. I digress because I'll get to that later. Mr. Jawanza stated, developing positive self images and discipline will remain difficult if we are not clear on the distinction between childhood and adulthood. Children who grow up too fast will lack the respect for elders and vital information to achieve this goal. In contrast, the new technical economy has lengthened the period called childhood. Many children are bored and view themselves as non productive and inactive with no political or economic strength. So here's my opinion on the quote. I believe there is a clear distinction between childhood and adulthood in a society. We correlate earning money, having responsibility, and providing for oneself and or family with being an adult. I believe that the lack of structure in some Black American households create a blurred vision of the distinction between childhood and adulthood for the Black child and sometimes the Black adults if the family structure is highly unstable. But that's my personal opinion and observation. Okay, let's get into the meat and potatoes because the truth is structural realities such as elitism, cultural monism, and world Americanization contributes to the academic and cultural problem of Black students, miseducated to believe in individual freedom and that one is thus responsible for their own success or failure. Black students often question their own intelligence when they do not succeed in school. Listen, and I mean listen closely. The American educational system has a dual purpose for Black American students. First is to socialize them into accepting a value system, history, and culture of European Americans. Second is education for economic productivity. So let's talk about the first purpose for educating Black children, which is to socialize them into accepting the value system, history, and culture of European Americans. This in itself is extremely, and I mean extremely, my lips are tight, problematic because not a single one of these elements benefit Black American students. It don't benefit Black people at all. I mean, the value system is based on philosophies and ideas that revolve around individualism and deception regarding freedom, liberty, and equality. Individualism is a foreign concept to African people. It did not exist. It does not work well for us. So we really shouldn't be practicing it. African societies historically centered on communism, and I know, communism is looked down upon because a lot of communist systems that exist today, they're like dictators. But the ones that were really really good, they killed those leaders, and we live in a society that is based on capitalism and. Communism essentially is a threat to capitalism, but I digress. I digress. The idea is that the success of group ensures the success of individuals. So the African worldview is, if I say this right, Ubuntu, which is I am because we are. But Western individualism pushes a me first mentality that disconnect people from their community and culture. When Black children are taught to embrace individualism, they are being stripped away from their ancestral value system that emphasize collective success, shared responsibility, and community upliftment. This individualism teaches Black children to get ahead alone, to focus on personal success rather than collective progress. And when the individual success is achieved, often within a system designed to marginalize their community, they're held up as a example of quote unquote proof that the system is fair, while the larger Black community remains systematically oppressed. And the idea of freedom, liberty, and equality is completely deceitful, as it truly doesn't exist for all Americans. American promise of freedom, liberty, and equality is a lie for Black Americans. These ideals were never intended for Black people. I mean, the Constitution was written when Black people were considered property, not human beings. Even after emancipation, systems like the Black Code, Jim Crow, redlining, mass incarceration, and police violence continued to deny Black people true freedom and equality. The system talks about quote unquote justice for all, but justice has always been conditional and contingent upon whiteness. Teaching Black children these ideals without acknowledging the historical and ongoing exclusion of Black people conditions them to believe in a false narrative. And worse, blame themselves when the promise of equality never materialized. And accepting history, this is a joke. The way history is taught in American schools is a weapon itself. Here's an example. Christopher Columbus, and this is just one of many examples of glorified violence and deceit, or the absence of such. Christopher Columbus wasn't a brave explorer. He was a violent colonizer who brought genocide, slavery, and exploitation. Yet Americans are forced to memorize his quote unquote greatness while leaving out the moral aspect of his character. And it's not even just Columbus. Leaders like Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, and Andrew Jackson are held as American heroes. But the truth is, they enslaved Black people, raped Black women, and built their wealth through oppression. Without presenting the full truth, Black students are left admiring these figures and internalizing the idea that morality, leadership, and greatness looks like white supremacy and brutality. When Black children are taught to accept this narrative, they are being conditioned to A, admire oppressors while neglecting their own heroes, B, or two, internalize inferiority by consistently seeing their own culture marginalized, and C, or three, whatever, I don't know if I'm doing letters or numbers, accept systems of power that devalue them as natural and justified. This kind of socialization shapes how Black youth perceive themselves and the role in society. It's not just education, it's miseducation, as Carter G. Woodson warned in The Miseducation of the Negro. I personally believe this is why many minorities were able to vote for someone like Trump the second time, a man whose rhetoric and policies were deeply rooted in white supremacy. When the system trained people to accept oppressive values, they may not even realize they're aligning themselves with forces that work against their own liberation. Accepting European American culture, crazy work, straight up crazy work. Because accepting European American culture as superior isn't just harmful, it's soul crushing. It's teaching Black children to worship systems and structures that degrade them while rejecting their own rich heritage. From hair discrimination to colorism, from erasing African spirituality and adopting Eurocentric beauty standards, the system embeds the idea that anything African is less than. And this isn't accidental. It's designed to maintain a racial hierarchy where European American culture and values remain dominant, and Black people are conditioned to remain subservient. This is why reclaiming truth and power is so important. I mean, the only way forward for Black children is to be taught the truth, our true history, our true contributions to civilization, and our ancestral values. They need to see themselves reflected in stories such as strength, resilience, and brilliance, not just oppression. Black children need to learn about leaders like Marcus Garvey, Malcolm X, Nat Turner, Dr. Amos Wilson, Dr. Frances Welsing, Honorable Gaddafi, and my mans that's still living, I can't pronounce his last name, but his first name is Ibrahim, and he's the president of Burkina Faso. That's if I'm pronouncing that right too, but I'm rooting for you, Brody. These people need to be recognized, and not just as footnotes, but as architects of liberation. We need to decolonize education that centers Black culture, history, and values, and education that teaches our children to value themselves, love their identity, and fight for collective progress. Without that, the system will continue to produce generations that uphold values that were never meant to serve them. The second purpose of the American educational system for educating Black students is for economic productivity. And you'll say, well, isn't it like that for all of its students? The answer is actually yes. However, Black economic productivity has historically and contemporarily benefited everyone but Black people. The neighborhoods where Black communities reside are saturated with businesses owned by outsiders who extract wealth but rarely reinvest it into the community. This cycle of economic drain leaves Black communities economically powerless and dependent, which is by design. See, when Black people do create sustainable economic systems like Tulsa, Rosewood, Black Bottom, and countless other thriving Black communities, they were either burnt to the ground, drowned, rezoned, or gentrified into extinction. And this was done by the public and private sector. The system doesn't allow Black communities to accumulate generational wealth because wealth equates to power, and power threatens the status quo. I don't know how many times I need to say this, reiterate it, or whatever the case may be. But the system, this Western economic system, it has a hierarchy with whites being at the top and blacks being at the bottom. Black people have a specific place in this system that helps benefit everybody else but us. And I like to tell people too, even when we look at other minorities and we align ourselves with other minorities, the moment that Black people become self sufficient economically, is the moment that $1.7 trillion that Black people essentially just give away to other people, it comes to us. They practice group economics amongst themselves. And then they also have the ability to come into our communities and create even more economic opportunities. Well, guess what? When we start to be self sufficient, we're going to be taking food out of somebody else's mouth. Do you think they will allow that to happen without a fight? Do you think if the system was built off the backs of the exploitation of Black people, that they would just willingly let us into the system? This entire system puts profit over people. They don't care. The sooner we realize that, the faster we should be taking action. Even today, the tools used to dismantle Black economic growth have evolved. Gentrification, that's misplacing Black residents, calling it urban renewal. Eminent domain, that's when the government literally comes in and steal people land for quote unquote public use. And then we can't forget that predatory lending and redlining still exists. Keep in mind, all of this is done by the government, which means law is protecting it. Let me repeat that again. The government is conspiring against Black economic growth. And this is the same government that we go to for help. I mean, I think it will be pretty obvious that the help that is provided to Black people, knowing what they have done to us historically and contemporarily, proves that it's not effective, at least the way that it should be. Look, Black children are treated like commodities to be imbued with skills which are brought and sold on the labor market for the profit of capitalists. Black children to be labored in a capitalist structure that strives off of their exploitation. Our children aren't being educated to own businesses, innovate, or build generational wealth. They're being trained to clock in and work for those who do. And because they're not being taught to value themselves or their culture, they rarely question why they're being conditioned to serve instead of lead. I mean, these aren't even questions that come across Black adults' minds, let alone young children. This is why it's extremely important that Black students are being taught by Black educators who are in the industry strictly for liberating Black students. And don't get it twisted. Educators in the struggle of liberation also have a purpose for educating Black children. First is raising the function of consciousness for Black people. And second is educating for a tooling function. Raising consciousness is crucial. It is a necessity because Black children need an Afrocentric education that instills love for their Blackness. teaches real history and centers African philosophies and tradition. When Black children understand who they are, when they know their lineage, their power, and the systems designed to oppress them, they stop seeing themselves through the lens of inferiority and start seeing themselves as agents for change. If you don't know where you come from, you won't know where you're going. But when Black children reclaim history, they reclaim their power. They learn that greatness is in their DNA. Power isn't begged for, it's taken. Let me repeat that. Power is not begged for, it is taken. And liberation isn't granted, it is fought for. Second is tooling education. It's not enough just to raise consciousness if Black children don't have the tools to navigate the world strategically. We need to arm them with the skills, knowledge, and strategies to dismantle oppressive systems while building new liberated ones. This includes financial literacy and cooperative economics, so we stop being the economic stepping stool and build wealth within our own communities. It includes entrepreneurship and business development, teaching Black children to create, own, and control, political education, and civic engagement so we can stop asking for justice and start demanding and taking power. STEM, law, and infrastructure knowledge to equip future leaders with the tools to build systems that serve us. It's not about attacking the system necessarily, it's about making sure that we are safe and we have a fair chance to fight. I've always believed they can just give us a piece of the land and we do what we need to do and watch us thrive. But I already know if that happens, the system will naturally fail because eventually Black people will start looking to Africa as a source of resources. Let's move on to statistical analysts. The University of Chicago conducted a study of 70,000 schools trying to determine the major factor in student performance. You would think that the most important factors would have been the parent demographic or how much money the school had. Instead, it was the expectations the teachers and parents had for the child. Students perform better in schools when their parents and teachers have higher expectations. And parents often place the burden on schools to educate, console, and feed their children, especially in an economy where many adults work away from home. And we have to think about it. The Black household is, for the most part, is being ran by single parents, whether it's the mother or the father. Teachers who care deeply about their students feel that parents aren't pulling their weight, which they most likely are not for the reason just explained. But this leads to an increased responsibility for the teacher, which I could imagine cause frustration. Because I would. If the children are out of control and my salary didn't increase, however, my responsibility increased, oh yeah, I would feel some type of way. And we can't forget that there's also teachers out there that truly believe Black children can't and are unable to learn regardless of their efforts, which ultimately leads to a self fulfilling prophecy becoming a reality. Many teachers in the system already assume Black children can't learn or that they're too difficult or unreachable. But the reality is, when Black children feel seen, valued, and believed in, they thrive. That is why it is essential that Black children are being taught by educators who are in the trenches of liberation. Educators who love Blackness, believe in Black potential, and refuse to accept mediocrity. I mean, I could honestly say all of the teachers that really pushed me and believed in me were Black female teachers. With Black male teachers following, parents and teachers aren't communicating effectively. Both feel the burden and both often express frustration, but rarely to each other in ways that foster collaboration. The lack of dialogue and mutual accountability leaves Black children caught in the middle, suffering from the system that isn't built to nurture them. If Black parents and teachers aren't in alignment, the system wins. So we need parent teacher coalitions, spaces where both can strategize and advocate together. Community based educational framework to involve parents in shaping the educational experiences of their children. And parents, they really need to be putting in a little bit more effort at home too. I want to end this chapter off with this quote. An educator in a system of oppression is either a revolutionary or an oppressor. The question of education for Black people in America is a question of life and death, a question of power. Struggle is a form of education, perhaps the highest form. See, educators who understand this duality recognize that their work is not just about teaching subjects. It's about teaching freedom. They don't just fill minds with information. They ignite the fire of revolution in the students. I really hope you guys gained some insight from this audio/video, which was me breaking down chapter 1, The Politics of Educating Black Children, from the book Developing Positive Self-Images and Discipline in Black Children by the author Mr. Jawanza Kunjufu. Also, I gave in my thoughts and opinions, and I look forward to you joining me in chapter 2, which is developing positive self-images and self-esteem in Black children. You have the day you deserve, and bye for now.